Hello everyone and welcome back to Eat the Past. Today we will be making Jell-O salad, a southern dish from the 50s, and we will go into the history of the Cuban Missile Crisis. This dish isn't really for the faint of heart, so be warned. Anyways, the ingredients are as follows. Jell-O, cold water, a can of pineapple chunks and juice, celery and carrots, Miracle Whip, cherries, and cottage cheese.
To start off, put a cup of water into a pan to boil, and put a separate cup to chill in the fridge. When the water starts boiling, dissolve a packet of Jell-O into it and mix. In October of 1962, the world came closer to nuclear war than any other point in history. For 13 tense days, the United States and the Soviet Union stood at the brink, locked in a deadly standoff over Cuba. But to really understand the Cuban Missile Crisis, we need to take a look at the history that led up to it. The Cold War rivalry, the Cuban Revolution, and the balance of terror between the superpowers. Cuba, which is 90 miles south of Florida, had long been under the shadow of American influence. For decades, U.S. companies dominated its sugar industry, and American tourists flocked to Havana's casinos. Add some pineapple juice to the chilled water and mix it slowly into the hot Jell-O solution. Finally, toss it into the fridge for a couple hours. In 1959, when Fidel Castro's guerrilla fighters overthrew dictator Batista, at first, the U.S. hoped it could work with Castro, but relations soured quickly. Castro nationalized American businesses, pushed land reforms, and increasingly aligned himself with Moscow. By 1961, Cuba was firmly in the Soviet camp. The U.S. responded aggressively. In April of 1961, the CIA trained Cuban exiles to invade the Bay of Pigs and overthrow Castro. The invasion was a disaster. Within 3 days, Castro's forces had crushed it. For the United States, it was an embarrassment. For Castro, it was proof that America wanted him gone. And for Soviet leader Khrushchev, it was an opportunity. Now for the salad part of the Jell-O salad. We will use cottage cheese, Miracle Whip, pineapple chunks, and vegetables. Start off by putting some cups of cottage cheese into a large bowl. Then add half a cup of Miracle Whip. By 1962, the US had hundreds of long-range missiles capable of striking the Soviet Union, plus bombers and missile bases in places like Turkey and Italy. The Soviets, by contrast, had very few missiles that could reliably reach the US mainland. Khrushchev, the Soviet leader, believed placing nuclear missiles in Cuba would solve several problems at once. Finally, chop up your celery and carrots, and then crush some pineapple chunks and mix it up into a bowl. Militarily, it would even the playing field, giving the Soviets a way to strike the United States directly. Politically, it would defend Cuba, a socialist ally, from another US invasion. And symbolically, it would show the world that the Soviet Union was not afraid to confront American power. So in the summer of 1962, Khrushchev secretly shipped nuclear missiles, bombers, and thousands of Soviet troops to Cuba. The plan was to install the weapons quickly and announce their presence only once they were operational. But secrecy didn't last. On October 14, 1962, a U-2 spy plane flying over Cuba photographed missile sites under construction. When President JFK was briefed the next day, he knew the stakes. The presence of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba was unacceptable to American security. Kennedy convened a group of advisors called ex-con, and out of all the opinions, Kennedy eventually chose a naval quarantine of Cuba. By blockading the island, US ships could prevent more Soviet missiles from arriving, while pressuring Cuba to remove the weapons already there. Kennedy went on television to inform the American people. For the first time, the world heard about the missiles in Cuba. The announcement shocked Americans who had gone their lives unaware of how close danger really was. Across the country, people prepared for the worst. They stockpiled food, crowded in churches, and even built backyard fallout shelters. Soviet leader Khrushchev sent a long, emotional letter proposing a deal. The Soviets would remove their missiles from Cuba if the US pledged not to invade the island. Kennedy saw hope in this offer, but the very next day, a second, harsher message arrived, demanding that the US also remove its Jupiter missiles from Turkey. At the same time, a U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba, killing the pilot. Kennedy decided to publicly respond to only the first letter, accepting the terms of no invasion in exchange for missile withdrawal. Privately, through back channels, he agreed that the US would remove its Jupiter missiles from Turkey within a few months. But this part would not be made public. In the aftermath, a direct hotline was established between Washington and Moscow to allow instant communication in times of crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the culmination of decades of tension, ideology, and power politics. And it was resolved not by force, but by negotiation, restraint, and a willingness to compromise. When it's all thoroughly mixed, you can get out your mold and the Jell-O solution that's been in the fridge. Pour the Jell-O into the bowl, mix some more, and empty it into the mold. Let the mold then firm up in the fridge for 3 hours or more until firm. So here it is. It doesn't look terribly appetizing, and looks nothing like what my great-grandma used to make in Texas. I am not too excited whatsoever about this taste test. This thing is terrible, it is not good.
And I do not recommend recreating this dish whatsoever. There were zero redeeming qualities. Thanks for watching though, and take care.